The office was a tomb, silent and foreboding. Darkness clung to every corner, the only light coming from Alex's desk lamp, casting long, eerie shadows that danced on the walls. Papers overflowed from trays, a testament to endless tasks and unrelenting deadlines that seemed to multiply by the hour. The air hung heavy, thick with the smell of stale coffee and fear, a pungent reminder of the countless hours spent in this oppressive space. Alex hunched over his keyboard, eyes bloodshot and weary from the relentless strain. His fingers flew across the keys, a desperate race against a deadline that loomed like a specter over his shoulder. Each tick of the clock felt like a hammer blow to his skull, a relentless reminder of the time slipping away.
Faster, Alex, you need to pick up the pace.
Boomed a voice from the shadows, echoing through the empty office. It was the manager, a hulking figure shrouded in darkness, his presence as intimidating as his voice. His voice held no warmth, only the cold edge of expectation, cutting through the silence like a knife. Alex flinched, his heart a drum against his ribs, pounding with anxiety and fear. He had to finish this project, no matter the cost. The weight of his responsibilities bore down on him, almost suffocating. His job, his life, depended on it. Failure was not an option, and the pressure was immense, a constant gnawing presence in his mind. Determination etched into his features, Alex pushed through the fatigue, driven by the fear of losing everything he had worked so hard for. His fingers moved with a frantic energy, each keystroke a step closer to salvation or doom. The hours dragged on, the clock's hands moving with agonizing slowness, each minute feeling like an eternity. But amidst the despair, a glimmer of hope flickered in Alex's eyes. He could see the end in sight, the finish line just within reach. With a final decisive keystroke, Alex completed the project. Relief washed over him, a wave of exhaustion and triumph. He leaned back in his chair, closing his eyes, savoring the moment of victory. The deadline shadow had passed, and he had emerged victorious. The air grew colder, an unnatural chill seeping into the room. A shiver ran down Alex's spine, despite the stifling office air. It was as if the temperature had dropped several degrees in an instant. He rubbed his arms, trying to chase away the sudden chill that seemed to cling to his skin. The warmth of the office was no match for the icy fingers that seemed to grip him. A low hum resonated from the depths of the office, a ghostly chorus joining the incessant ticking of the clock. The sound was almost hypnotic, drawing him into a state of heightened awareness. Shadows seemed to twist and writhe in the periphery of his vision, dancing just out of reach. They moved with a life of their own, creating shapes that defied explanation.
Just stress, he told himself, trying to rationalize the irrational.
Alex muttered, forcing his gaze back to the computer screen. The glow of the monitor offered little comfort, its light casting eerie shadows on the walls. But the words rang hollow, their meaning lost in the fog of his growing unease. The text on the screen blurred, his focus slipping away. The hair on the back of his neck stood on end, a primal response to the unseen threat. He could feel the weight of unseen eyes watching him. He felt eyes on him, a presence he couldn't see but couldn't shake off. It was as if the very air around him was alive, pressing in on him from all sides. Slowly he swiveled in his chair, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. Each beat echoed in his ears, a reminder of his vulnerability in the face of the unknown. His hand trembled as he reached for his phone, hoping for a connection to the outside world. But the screen showed no signal, isolating him further in his growing fear. In the reflection of the dark window, he thought he saw a face behind him, a fleeting image that vanished as quickly as it appeared. His breath caught in his throat, the room closing in around him. Panic surged through him, and he stood up abruptly, knocking over his chair. He looked around frantically, searching for any sign of the presence that haunted him. The office remained silent, the only sound the flickering of the overhead lights. The oppressive silence was deafening, amplifying his every movement. Alex backed away slowly, his eyes wide with fear. His hands trembled uncontrollably, the chill in the air now a tangible force pressing against him. The clock ticked louder, each second stretching into an eternity. Shadows moved in the background, their dance a sinister reminder of the unseen presence. Sweat drenched his face, his eyes darting around the room. The feeling of being watched grew stronger, an invisible gaze that pierced through him. Overwhelmed, he collapsed back into his chair, burying his head in his hands. The fear was suffocating, an inescapable presence that loomed over him. He closed his eyes, taking a deep breath, trying to calm his racing heart. But the presence remained, a chilling reminder that he was not alone. Standing in the doorway was a figure. Gaunt, almost translucent, it shimmered at the edge of the light. Its eyes burned like hot coals, searing into Alex's very soul. Alex gasped, pushing back from his desk. The figure remained, unmoving, its gaze filled with a terrible knowing.
You don't have to do this, it's not worth it.
The figure rasped, its voice a hollow echo. Alex's breath hitched in his throat. He knew that voice, the weariness in its tone. It mirrored his own exhaustion, his own growing despair.
Who are you?
He whispered, his voice trembling. The ghostly figure turned, gesturing towards Alex's slumped form reflected in the darkened window. It was Alex, or rather, what he was becoming. Haggard, drained, a ghost of his former self. The figure was his reflection, a manifestation of his own burnout.
I am you, or what you will become if you continue down this path.
A cold dread gripped Alex's chest. He saw his future reflected in the ghost's hollow eyes, a future devoid of joy, of life. But the deadline, his job, he was trapped. Weeks later, the office stood deserted, a ghostly reminder of its once bustling activity. Dust lay thick on surfaces, the silence broken only by the scuttling of unseen creatures. The air was heavy with neglect, the scent of abandonment lingering like a forgotten memory. The once cluttered desk was now eerily clean, a single picture frame the only remaining personal item, a photo of a smiling Alex, a stark contrast to the room's oppressive atmosphere. The frame, slightly askew, seemed to whisper stories of happier times, of laughter and camaraderie that once filled the air.
A young man hesitantly entered, his gaze darting nervously around the room. His footsteps echoed in the emptiness, each step a reminder of the solitude that now reigned. This was Ben, the new hire, his youthful face etched with apprehension. He had been warned about the office's eerie past, but nothing could have prepared him for the palpable sense of desolation that greeted him. He had heard whispers, rumors of the previous occupant, of a life consumed by work. The stories painted a picture of a man who had given everything to his job, only to vanish without a trace. He shivered despite the room's stillness, a sense of unease settling upon him. The shadows seemed to move, playing tricks on his mind, as if the office itself was alive, watching, waiting. Ben took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. He knew he had to make this work, but the weight of the past hung heavy in the air, a constant reminder of the office's haunted history.
A cold wind swept through the office, rustling papers long forgotten. Ben spun around, startled, his heart pounding in his chest. Standing before him was the ghostly figure of Alex, his sorrow-filled eyes fixed on the new employee.
"Don't," Alex's ghost whispered, his voice a mournful sigh that seemed to seep from the very walls. "Don't let them do this to you."
Ben stumbled back, fear tightening its icy grip on his throat. He knew of the stories, the tragic fate of his predecessor. He could feel the weight of the office, its suffocating pressure.
"They promise you the world," the ghost continued, his voice filled with a bitter understanding. "Promotions, bonuses, a life of success, but it's all a lie."
Ben listened, captivated by the spectral figure's words that resonated with his own growing anxieties.
The ghost gestured around the desolate office, its spectral hand passing through a stack of dusty files. "This place, it consumes you. It takes everything. Your time, your energy, your soul. And for what? For a pat on the back, a bigger paycheck. Get out while you still can. Don't end up like me, another forgotten cog in this machine."
Ben stood frozen, torn between the ghost's warning and the lure of ambition whispering in his ear. He could stay, climb the corporate ladder, achieve the success he always craved, but at what cost? He looked at the ghost, at the sorrow etched into his spectral features, and he knew the answer. The price was too high. Taking a deep breath, Ben turned away from the depths of the office, away from the ghost and the suffocating promise of success. He walked towards the light streaming in from the hallway, each step lighter, more certain.
He could almost feel the ghost's sorrowful gaze on his back, but it no longer held him captive.
As he crossed the threshold, leaving the office behind, he felt a sense of release, a weight lifting from his shoulders. He would find another job, one that didn't demand his soul as payment. He would choose life, choose himself. The office remained a silent testament to ambition and its cost. But the ghost of Alex was no longer alone. His story, his sacrifice, had given Ben the strength to break free. And in doing so, Ben had given Alex's sacrifice meaning.
The cycle of overwork and despair could be broken. It started with a single voice, a whisper of warning in the darkness. And from that whisper, hope could bloom.
The final scene shifts to a bustling park, bathed in warm sunlight. Ben sits on a bench, a sense of peace washing over him. He pulls out a sketchbook, his hand moving confidently across the page. He is drawing, creating, finally living for himself.
The camera pans to the sky, the sun shining brightly. The message is clear. There is more to life than the relentless grind. Choose happiness. Choose yourself.
For sometimes, the most terrifying monsters are not found in the shadows, but in the reflection of our own ambition.